So this is going to be a review of Isom. This is a comic book created by Eric July, aka the Young Ripper. He did a promotional for this on his YouTube channel. I was one of the people who participated in that campaign. So we all started receiving this comic book, this graphic novel. I don't want to say the wrong name. I'm not somebody with a strong comic book understanding. I'm not somebody who's read comic books. This was just something that I felt like supporting because I supported the idea behind that. Eric July's basic message is don't cry and complain. It's just like what Lamar Jackson is doing, which is an aside, but don't cry and complain. Go out there and do the work and prove that you can do it. Don't keep waiting for people to make something happen for you. Please make a better comic book. Please stop turning, traditionally white characters into black characters. Please stop doing that. Nope, he just made his own universe. So this is the first edition of that universe, number one, Isom. So I thought the comic book was pretty good. Again, I don't have the best working knowledge on how to judge books. So I don't want to overrate. I don't want to underrate. All I can tell you is what I thought. So overall, I thought this was a good read. There are a lot of different character setups in this book. You have, of course, Avery, aka Isom. You have his sister and the nature of her job. You have the police department. You have the Alpha Corps and the fact that they're hiring empowered people. They call them exceps. You have the Darren character, who's the club leader, who has the gorilla dollars. He can afford to hire his own exceps as bodyguards. You have the Yara character, who they introduce briefly, gets into a tussle with Isom and then kind of disappears again. You have the rock band of exceps that are, kind of biding their time in the shadows. But you have other groups of exceps like we saw in the club, or like you'll read inside the club, that are plotting their own moves and they're just waiting, biding their time. So there's a lot going on in a sense of setup. There's the farm. There's the farm where Avery was isolated on, tried to get away from the game. He was on his Danny Glover. He said, listen, I'm tired of life. I'm too old for this shit. Just leave me alone. And then it was Michael Corleone. His sister calls him and he like, man, every time I try to get out, they pull me right back in. So there's the farmstead. And there's an interesting thing with the farm. There was a character that was like, hey, I left this gear inside of the barn, and he kind of just disappears. So the Isom book, and there's probably some other things that I'm forgetting, just, going back through it in my head of setup items that are there that we're just seeing how they kind of pay off, how they build off of each other. I thought the story was good. Again, Avery, aka Isom, he's away from the game. He gets a call from his sister for some help looking for a young woman. He's like, nah, get out of here. I'm not helping y'all. I'm not some errand boy. And, they said, listen, don't do it for me. Do it for the girl's mother. So he says, fine. He goes and confronts the Darren character, who, again, is like the kingpin of this universe. Darren doesn't appreciate how he just waltzing all up in here, asking questions. He like, listen, if you want a job, I give you a job. You could clean my floors or something, but don't be worried about my business. So, of course, Isom takes that very personally, starts laying the smackdown on everybody. And then that's the first time we see Ace Bodyguard, who's his own personally hired except. And they get it on. He throws Isom out the club. He and Yara clash because while this is going on in Isom's side, on the flip side, there's the Yara character that they introduce who's fighting against the Alpha Corps, fighting against Alpha Corps' powered members, fighting against their exceps. So they're getting the best of her. The except for Darren is getting the best of Isom. The two of them end up clashing. It's a classic case of mistaken identity. She thinks that he's another one of these Alpha Corps members in disguise, and he thinks that she's just another hired gun for Darren, paid to take him out. So they clash with each other. Yara gets the best out of him, puts him in the hospital, for a little while. Isom gets out the hospital, gets right back to his job and his purpose. His sister picks him up. He gets right back out there to the club. While he's at the club doing some reconnaissance, trying to figure out how he's going to take it because he doesn't have a real plan at this point. He's just going with it. He runs into the girl that the comic book starts us out. Well, the second scene of the comic book starts us out with, and that's the Jasmine girl. He finds her and, he's trying to ask her questions. She's being very vague and aloof, and she's interrupted by some of the hired guys, some of the security outside, like, hey, don't touch that woman. How dare you touch that woman? So, of course, he got to get it on with these guys. He bursts through the door. He's laying SmackDown Part 2. And then he and Ace Bodyguard have their second fight in which Isom is victorious, but is interrupted by the Alpha Corps. So he got to get missing. He goes back to report his findings to his sister. He's like, listen, I found this and that. They got the footage. They're breaking down the footage as far as her body language and what's going on with her. So Isom has at least figured out that she's in some type of trouble, but he doesn't know. But in his mind, the Jasmine situation kind of become second place. His primary focus now is wanting revenge on Darren for disrespecting him as a man. So he goes to, his former buddy of his, a guy who worked with him in the past, to get his uniform. And of course, he's stepping out clean, talking about it fits perfectly. And that's where the story ends on this one. Now, I thought the story was good. Again, it's a simple story to get you into the world, get the character dusted off, get